Hey folks, today I want to bring a story to you that I've had for a while, but felt a little intimidated to post it, and there's some legalities and logistics I had to get together. But in essence, it's what comments I make, statements and claims I make throughout this video are my opinion. They should not be taken as fact alone, and some of it is speculation as well. So take it for what it's worth. We will be going through a personnel file of a prior Delhi employee that's made some claims against the trustees and against a couple local churches. And I don't have the answers. Some answers. I certainly don't have all the answers, but I'm going to try to articulate through this video. I'm going to try to share both truth and questions and or speculations I have related to what happened here. So I put together a high-level timeline that kind of outlines what's happening here. And the code inspector at the time for Delhi, we're going to call him John, on 1/18/23, he received some verbal counseling relating to St. Dominic. On 5/23/23, Skylar Miller, the township administrator, wrote a written reprimand, horrible spelling, on reports that John had made of law breaking, or he documents reports that code enforcement John made of law breaking happening that he in essence wasn't allowed to enforce. And Skylar Miller writes him up for insubordination and unprofessionalism. Roughly a year later, he receives written counseling related to none of this. Now, prior, he had been considered and was scored, as I saw it, as average, a 3 pretty much across the board. Not completely, but a 3 for the most part, on a 1 to 5, which is average. Doing his job, not going above and beyond is the way I would read it. I think they label it as a 3, maybe an average. After that written counseling, I made a public records request for his personnel file, not knowing any of this. And I read through all the pages in the personnel file and discovered this. And so after all this happened, I ended up going to the trustees in a public trustee meeting to ask for comment. Trustee Seavey and Trustee Davis were there. Trustee Rose was not there that day. My recollection is that they had no knowledge of it. No knowledge that they had even been accused of this. No knowledge of any investigation related to this. Just no knowledge. They did ask Skylar Miller if he had comment on it. Same meeting. Skylar comments that it is a personnel issue. Now, when Skylar says it's a personnel issue, if you know your trustee meetings or you've been watching them, you know trustees don't comment on personnel issues. So when he says it's a personnel issue, he thus essentially shuts down trustee comment on it. They can comment on a employee if it's positive stuff, I think, but if it's negative stuff, they legally can't comment. Now myself, I think it may be a personnel issue and also an issue of public interest of allegations and accusations between local Catholic churches and the trustees, one or more. So I think there's two issues going on here, and to hide behind it being a personnel issue, I think is the wrong move, or was the wrong move. Skylar also mentioned that he had investigated it. But when asked for the documentation, his response was that there is no documentation of an investigation outside of what's in the personnel file. Myself, I think it would be critical to document any investigation of allegations of what of any allegation of this kind. And I'm reading some of it. This is some of my words being read into it of what I understand. We're going to look at what their words say here in just a minute. After that, I reached out to Our Lady of Victory and St. Dominic and received either an explicit no comment on the issue or through lack of not responding to my inquiry, received no comment. After that, more recently, John gives notice to resign with same day notice. Now, I just want to say a couple things about John. Number one, I think he's probably a good human. I've met him several times. I had one spiffy with him at one point. He's come to my house and provided me township services in a professional and I believe honest manner. He's the guy who used to come out if you complained about your neighbor's grass. If it's 12 inches tall, it's a violation. If it's over 12, he'd give you 13 inches. And he's a veteran and served his country honorably. It was told to me by Skylar Miller and Lori, who worked with him, his co-workers, his superior in some sense, and Skylar, that as I recollect, he's a good guy, good employee. And it seemed that way. He's an average employee, good employee, until he came out with allegations that we're going to look at. And then all of a sudden, and it makes me wonder, where John made this complaint against trustees and local churches breaking code enforcement law, ORC law, and then all of a sudden he gets verbal counseling, and then all of a sudden it's escalated to when he sticks with his story, when he doubles down on his conviction, then he gets a written reprimand, and then after that, and getting more written counseling for things not even related to that weren't in his history anytime prior to that. And then at the end of the day, all of a sudden he resigns with 0 days notice, same day notice. Let's go look at the personnel file, folks. See what we have here. So this is the personnel file of John. And this is the written reprimand that's on this step right here. It's going to refer to this verbal counseling, and it's going to refer to these allegations here. So let's look at this. I'm just going to read through the whole thing, beginning to end, so we don't miss anything. I'm going to pause here and there to make some quick comments along the way. This is written by Township Administrator Skylar Miller, written write-up, not John's supervisor, but it's like his supervisor, written up by Skylar Miller, which I find odd in and of itself. And it's to John, the code enforcement guy, making allegations. This is an official written reprimand for your failure to perform the required functions of your position in a professional manner and insubordination for not following a directive from the township administrator. On the morning of May 18th, 2023, you engaged the township administrator in a conversation in the administration parking lot. During the discussion, you brought up your frustration that St. Dominic was getting away with violating the zoning resolution, and you said that you would be willing to lose your job, willing to sue, willing to ruin careers, or end elected officials over this. Pause. Folks, to me, that's a statement of conviction. And we're going to find out later, this isn't the first time this guy's bringing up this topic of local churches breaking law and getting away with it. This is this guy's job at the time. He is code enforcement. His title, zoning inspector. It's what he does. Watch how they're going to respond to this. Excuse me. I'm going to continue. Let me just reread that part and then I'll continue. You said that you would be willing to lose your job, willing to sue, willing to ruin careers, or end elected officials over this. That would be the trustees most likely. Possibly the fiscal officer. This is Skylar talking. I explained to you that your comments were highly inappropriate and that we could discuss your concerns, but that we would not continue this discussion in the parking lot. I reminded you of our prior discussion regarding St. Dominic, in which I directed you to take any concerns you had with them to your supervisor or to me. So he spoke with him prior and said, bring your concerns to your supervisor to me. It looks like John then on this date brought them to him, and then it's being labeled all of a sudden as yada yada. He also mentions that there was a prior discussion regarding St. Dominic. To me, I'm thinking that was possibly what happened on 118 when he got verbal counseling for bringing up his concerns, in my opinion. So let me move on. This next part is scratched out. And it's scratched out, it says, John stated he did not direct the, I'm not sure if that's flags, to be removed, or signs maybe. I don't know. It says, you then advised me that Our Lady of Victory was currently in violation. So the St. Dominic thing's been going on, but Schuyler's admitting he's bringing up a code violation happening right as they're speaking. It says, you then advised me that Our Lady of Victory was currently in violation because of the illegal signage Braxton Brewery placed for their upcoming festival. I advised you, as I have previously, that you are a community ambassador first and a code enforcement officer second. I advise you that any temporary signage for the festival would either be acceptable as part of the temporary event or that it would be taken down before a violation letter could be sent. Is that an admission by Schuyler that they are violating that law? Or is that statement, festival would either be acceptable as part of a temporary event? I don't see him mentioning code in here or law in here. This is just my read on it. Or he seems to at least admit that there's a possibility or that it would be taken down before a violation letter could be sent. How long does it take to send a violation letter? Are you saying that seemingly they would be placing this sign up year after year after year, that there's nothing you can do about it? You're just going to let them violate year after year after year? Let's read on. I then directed you to not pursue enforcement and that I would look into the signs myself. Does he mention anything about the results of him looking into the signs in this document? Is there any documentation of how he looked into the signs and what was the result of him looking into the signs? Did he also look into the trustees? Because there seems to be a complaint by an employee related to the trustees as well. No documentation. It was then reported to me that you were seen at Our Lady of Victory on Friday, May 19th, and the Braxton Brewery signs were taken down. It's not clear to me whether he's saying John took those signs down or whether John instructed them to take them down and they took them down. But I'm back again. But it's not made clear here. This documentation isn't clear about that. Additionally, during our conversation on May 18th, you justified your insubordination by claiming that because two trustees are parishioners at St. Dominic, we are letting St. Dominic do whatever they want. Pause. I would find it hard to believe that that's the only justification or claim that John would make for making the claims he's making. I feel like there's something. He says this statement is false and unprofessional to say the least. Did he already do the investigation and look into it? Or is he just making an assumption there that the statements are false and unprofessional to say the least? Because he didn't say the part of our unanswered questions. The trustees have not directed me or township staff to give preferential treatment to a church or any other organization. Do they need to? Did John claim that? If he did, then why didn't you document that part of the claim? I would find it hard to believe that his claim is that his connection, that he would make such serious allegations just because they attend church there. And they do more than attend church there. We're going to see that later. That part isn't listed in here, but they have a lot bigger association than just being parishioners there. I believe that at least one of them is to some respect a leader within that organization. But I speculate, we'll look at that later. On January 18th, 23, you received verbal counseling for your prior unprofessional behavior toward members of the St. Dominic Parish. The verbal counseling is not having the impact that we had expected on your professionalism, since your attitude and professionalism is not improving. Well, that's odd, because he didn't seem to have those problems prior to the claims. He seemed to be a guy that did his job prior to this. Consequently, this written reprimand for unprofessionalism and insubordination is to remind you of the critical importance of your behavior and to admonish you to comport yourself in a professional manner as a community ambassador of Delhi Township matters. Moving forward, you are directed to review all zoning resolution violations on a complaint-based practice only and not take any action unless approved by your supervisor. Now, if John, the citizen, calls and leaves a voicemail for John, the employee, code inspector, can John, the citizen, have same access to government services as Rich Gage? Not a bad example. As any other citizen? Because I don't have the same access as any other citizen. But does John have the right as a citizen to make that complaint? And who's he make it to? Township administrator, while he's in the parking lot, maybe not clocked in, and that gets written up for it? Can he make it to himself as code inspector? Leave himself a voicemail? This sounds shabby to me. That's what I'm going to say. I'll continue. You may continue to internally initiate and act upon public nuisance violations that fall under Ohio Revised Codes. Deviation from this directive will constitute insubordination. So it looks like they're letting them do it on the nuisance, but not the same on the zoning. Continuing problems will result in further disciplinary action up to and including employment termination. So now they're threatening his termination. Is there a pattern here? He complains about Delhi not following law, preferential being given to specific organizations that trustees have a special association with, and then half story being documented and not really transparency. As owners of a business, if an employee was going to make an accusation that your business partner was doing something, would you want to know about it? As a citizen of Delhi, would you have wanted Skylar Miller to come out in a public meeting and say, hey, we've had an allegation by one of our employees against the trustees on this, this, and this. I investigated it. I've documented that investigation. We found the trustees did no wrongdoing, and our employee was reprimanded for insubordination, yada, yada. Now, whether they can do all that or not, I don't know, but I would call that transparency. To find out about this on the back end, so let's go and look So then what happened after all this? After all this? John, the veteran, the guy I would call honest as most, more honest than most. That's how he struck me as. He came across professional and unprofessional mixed in my interactions with him, frankly. But mostly professional. I think the time he wasn't professional, it would have worked out really quickly, except Skylar Miller got in the way. But what happened on this story after all this? About a year later, after all that happened, on June 3rd, 2025, I, John, resigned my position as inspector for Delhi Township, effective June 3rd, 25. I find that suspicious. I find that suspicious. A man that honorably served his country. Prior to this happening, got 3s almost across the board on a 1 to 5. A 3 is not like a bad grade. It's like average. It's doing your job. You did your job. And then all of a sudden, he's pointing out code enforcement irregularities, being told he can't enforce stuff, having his job threatened, and then resigns with, what is it, same day notice? Maybe nearly nothing notice. Maybe he handed him this paper and walked out. Was he forced to resign? Was it still eating him up that he knew something where there was never any justice on it? That was his job, folks. He was trained on zoning inspection. And to me, I don't know what happened. I don't know really who's guilty here. I lean toward John being honest based on my interactions with him. And I lean toward Skylar not being an honest person. And we hear Skylar giving his side of the story, and we hear Skylar at one point looks like he even quotes John in a way that wouldn't have been what John said, because it's not in that right verbiage. It's not in the right tense, I don't think. We're going to look at it. And, yeah, so I went through this whole file and read through it to find this allegation of corruption. And so I tend not to trust to Skylar Miller. And the thing is that we never hear John's side of the story in all of this. See, I would think in an investigation, you would have a set of written questions and then give it to John to fill out and complete, and then have him sign it. Did St. Dominic administrator tell you that a trustee said that they could get away with it, as an example? Yes or no? And on the record, on the written record, either says yes or no. But we don't get John's side of the story in any of this. And in the investigation, we didn't get to hear what his story was told, other than through the words of Skylar Miller, which aren't reliable in my opinion. Let me skip that part for now, and let's go out and look at where I went from this. So this ain't going to be real exciting, but I went out and I did reach out to Our Lady of Victory and St. Dominic. I'm not going to play both those. Not too exciting. But Our Lady of Victory, I think, said they'd get back to me and never did. And St. Dominic did actually give a no comment response. Hey Google, call St. Dominic Church, Delhi Pike. Church, Delhi Pike. Sorry, folks. Before I do that, let me just hop over. Whoops.
Thank you for calling St. Dominic's Parish. If your call is an emergency or you would like to speak with our receptionist, please press 0. If you need help...
Sorry, folks. Before I do that, let me just hop over to Delhi Township, Ohio website. And remember, I asked the trustees about this in a public meeting, and they had no knowledge of it. Let's go to government. Board of Trustees. Trustee Davis here, who had no knowledge of these accusations or any knowledge of an investigation until I brought it up in a public meeting. Community service. Through his years as trustee, Mike has been involved in several service organizations, including, first one with a link to it is St. Dominic Parish and School. So we have that association there. Cheryl, I thought had something at one time, but I no longer see it. And Trustee Rose. You can see under St. Dominic Church and Social Services, it's unclear which of these is St. Dominic and which is Social Services, but it looks to me like she may have been in some key leader positions and decision-making positions. The Parent-Teacher Organization Board, was she on a board related to St. Dominic Church, on the PTO board for St. Dominic? You tell them that I said it was okay. Did that happen? I don't know. If there's a solid investigation that said it didn't happen, that was well documented, and had input from both sides of the fence, both from the trustees and or Skylar Miller and from the employee making the allegations, then I could give it a little bit more faith and confidence. far-fetched to ask the question or consider, is it possible that St. Dominic administrator in small talk with Trustee Rose says something like, dealing with code enforcement is giving me a hard time about this sign out here. And Trustee Rose says, oh, don't worry about that. And then the administrator, and I'm just speculating, goes back to the code enforcement and says, Trustee Rose said, don't worry about it. And then John communicates that to his supervisor and to Skylar Miller, Township Administrator, but that it never makes it into the documentation. Is that all possible? Is it possible? We shouldn't have to ask these questions because it should be better documented. I look at this as a failure of Skylar Miller as a Township Administrator doing an investigation into allegations of corruption, my term, against someone that looks like a whistleblower to me. That's what it looks like, using those terms loosely. And so that's what I have, folks. That's where this story pretty much ends. I will say it was roughly 2 weeks after I started asking questions about this that I was given a time, place, and manner restriction by Skylar Miller, and that was treated illegally, in my opinion, as a trespass